We're hearing from Nolan Wells, the 18-year-old who died over the weekend while on a boat trip with friends. As the mystery into his death is investigated, we're hearing from him himself.
It's really a blessing, just being here with some of my best friends, teammates, and we're all going to college together, most of us, so it's just truly a blessing to be here.
That was from February 2025, the day he signed to play football at Southwest Mississippi Community College in Pike County. He was last seen alive on July 4th on Horn Island, and his body was found 2 days later. Investigators are working to determine how he died. His friends told investigators they left the island and he stayed behind. They say he was supposed to take a different boat back to the mainland Saturday, but never did.
I would urge anyone that had information or was on the island to let us interview you and take down as much information as we can to really piece together and figure out what may have happened.
Nolan's family hired civil rights attorney Ben Crump. He says his team will conduct an independent investigation.
At some point during the afternoon, Nolan met a 19-year-old named Katie McCormick on the beach. What passed between them and what her account of that afternoon actually says will be covered in full. What matters here in the timeline is simple. Around 3:00 p.m., Nolan Xavier Wells was alive on Horn Island and seen by people who knew him. That is the last confirmed sighting. At almost exactly that same hour, something went wrong on the boat. Someone aboard placed a call for towing assistance. Dispatch audio from that call was later obtained through a public records request. And what it confirms is not in dispute by anyone. The BGE pump, the mechanical system responsible for keeping water from accumulating inside the hull, had failed. The vessel was taking on water, and the group needed help getting back to the mainland. That audio was recorded in real time on the afternoon of July 4th, hours before anyone on Earth knew that Nolan Wells would not be coming home. It cannot be a fabrication after the fact. It is an independent piece of evidence that exists entirely outside of anyone's memory of that afternoon. Warren Hudson, one of the friends aboard that boat, later sat down with the Officer Tatum podcast and spoke publicly about what happened next. Warren is a stepson of Jackson County Chancery Judge Ashley Cole, a detail that becomes relevant later in this case. His account of that afternoon is that the group was dealing with a genuine emergency. He said they did ask Nolan about leaving, and that Nolan made the decision to stay on the island with the girl he had met, intending to get a ride back to the mainland later on a different boat. That is Warren Hudson's account. It is presented here as exactly that, his stated version of events. GPS records show the boat departed Horn Island at 4:31 p.m. That matches almost exactly the timeline that Judge Ashley Cole had already described in an earlier public statement before the GPS data was released, and before anyone could accuse her of aligning her version to fit the records. The boat did not go straight home. It returned to its original departure dock at 5:44 p.m., having been towed at reduced speed for a stretch before picking back up. From there, the GPS data shows it moved into Fort Bayou at 5:52 p.m., returned to the dock at 6:06 p.m., then traveled to Fort Bayou boat launch at 7:19 p.m., where it was presumably towed by vehicle to a private residence. No one was not on it. The group did not call Christine when they got back. By every account available, that was not because anyone was trying to hide something. It was because this trip had been done before. Nolan was 18, and an evening without a phone call on a holiday weekend was not yet a reason for alarm. That calculation changed just after 11 p.m. when one of Nolan's friends called Christine directly. She has said publicly that Nolan's friends did not call her like that under normal circumstances. That call was a signal. She opened a location sharing app on her phone and searched for her son. What she found was not Nolan. It was his phone stationary on the mainland inside a friend's residence. His keys were there, too. Both had made it back from the island. No one had not. Christine called the Coast Guard herself. Warren Hudson placed a separate call around the same time. The Coast Guard's response was that based on how the situation was described, it did not meet the threshold for immediate deployment. No boat went out. No aircraft went up. The call was logged and the line went quiet. What followed was hours of Christine making calls, hitting walls, and being passed between agencies over a jurisdictional question that had no clean answer. Horn Island sits in the Mississippi Sound, and which agency held authority over a missing person case that originated, there was not something any single department could answer quickly. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office eventually agreed to open a formal report. Christine and Elmore drove to meet a deputy in a McDonald's parking lot late that night and told him everything they knew. By then, Nolan had been missing for hours, and the clock was still running. Elmore, one lay, did not wait for a command post. On the morning of July 5th, while agencies were still working out coordination on shore, Nolan's father took his own boat out and went looking for his son himself. That is the image that stays with you from this part of the story. A father on open water, searching alone, while the machinery of an official response was still assembling behind him. That response did come together. A command post was established at the Lake Mars boat launch in Ocean Springs. The search pulled in the Jackson County Sheriff's Department, the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, the National Park Service of Gulf Islands National Seashore, the United States Coast Guard, and United St. John Navy, a volunteer emergency response organization with experience running searches exactly like this one. Josh Gill, the United St. John Navy's incident commander, confirmed his organization received a direct call from Christine and moved immediately. Boats, drones, and personnel deployed within hours of that contact. Brian Trashers, the organization's national vice president, spoke publicly about the conditions on that stretch of the island. He noted the rip current running along the northwestern end of Horn Island is strong enough to put even capable swimmers in serious difficulty. He also raised a question that no one has fully answered. With hundreds of people spread across that beach on the afternoon of July 4th, the fact that not a single person has come forward to say they witnessed anyone in distress is something investigators and the family have both noted. On the afternoon of July 5th, the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources launched drone flights to survey the western side of Horn Island. The heat that day was significant enough to cause the drone batteries to swell. The flights were cut short. The search returned nothing. Early on the morning of July 6th, at approximately 8:45 a.m., a National Park Service ranger spotted a body in the water near the island's northwestern shore. Sharon John Ledbetter confirmed it matched the description that had been circulated for Nolan Wells. The following day, July 7th, Jackson County Coroner Bruce Lind confirmed identification through dental records. He also confirmed to CNN that the swimsuit recovered on the body matched the one Nolan had been photographed wearing. On July 4th, the search was over. Nolan Xavier Wells had been found. What nobody could tell his family yet, and what nobody can confirm to this day, is exactly how he ended up in that water. For weeks, the most important witness in this case was also the most absent one. Katie McCormick, 19 years old, has been publicly identified as the young woman Nolan Wells was speaking within his final confirmed minutes on Horn Island. She was there. She talked to him, and by every account available, she was the last person outside of Nolan's immediate friend group to interact with him before he disappeared. That made her account one of the most sought-after details in the entire investigation. It also made her one of the most misrepresented figures in the public conversation around it. For the first several weeks after Nolan's body was found, everything attributed to Katie arrived through someone else. First through a family friend, relaying what she claimed to have heard secondhand, then through Katie's own mother and sister posting on Facebook in an attempt to correct rumors that had already spread far beyond their control. Each of those accounts was filtered understandably through another person's memory of what Katie had said rather than coming directly from Katie herself. Then Christine sat down with her face to face. According to Christine, what Katie told her in that direct meeting did not line up with the version of events she had been hearing from other people. Christine said this publicly. She did not elaborate on every detail of that conversation, but the fact that she characterized it as inconsistent with what she had otherwise been told is significant on its own. The most detailed on-record account of Katie's actual position came from her sister Gracie McCormick, who spoke to the Daily Mail. According to Gracie, Katie's understanding at the time she left the island was that Nolan was heading back to the boat he had arrived on. She assumed based on the conversation she and Nolan had that his friends would not leave without him. Katie herself did not stay to watch him board. She left the island separately with her brother and his fiancée, who were part of a different group entirely from Nolan's. Gracie also pushed back on the version of events that had circulated online, the one where Nolan made a deliberate choice to stay on the island because he wanted to keep talking with Katie. That is not what Gracie described. Her account suggests Nolan believed he was walking back toward his own group, not making a decision to remain behind. That distinction is not a minor one. It shifts the entire frame of the question. The issue is not whether Nolan wanted to leave Horn Island that afternoon. Based on what Katie told Christine and what Gracie told the Daily Mail, he did. The issue is what happened between the moment he said goodbye to Katie and the moment that boat pulled away from the island without him. Katie McCormick herself has not spoken publicly as of this recording. What exists on record is Gracie's account and Christine's description of their meeting. Both are stated accounts from people with direct connections to the conversation, not confirmed testimony, not verified by investigators on record. They are treated here as exactly what they are. That 90-minute window from Nolan's last confirmed sighting around 3:00 p.m. to the boat's GPS-documented departure at 4:31 p.m. is where this case lives. Everything that is unresolved, everything that is contested, everything that investigators are still trying to piece together points back to that gap. What happened on that beach in those 90 minutes is the question no one has answered yet. When Nolan Wells was reported missing, his phone was not with him. It had made it back to the mainland. He had not. Christine already knew this from the location app search she ran the night of July 4th. The blue that placed Nolan's phone inside a friend's residence while her son was still on account of her on an island 10 miles offshore. What she did not know yet was what was on that phone. When she eventually accessed the device, both of Nolan's Snapchat accounts had been cleared. No saved photos, no saved videos. Nolan was, by all accounts, someone who documented gatherings like this one, the kind of person who had a record of the day on his phone, because that is what 18-year-olds do at holiday events with their friends. The content that should have been there was not, and under Snapchat's normal operating window, content typically remains retrievable for up to 24 hours. That window had not closed when Christine accessed the phone. Some text messages also appeared to be missing. None of that on its own is proof that anyone tampered with the device. People clear phones for reasons that have nothing to do with a crime. What it does is establish a question that needs a forensic answer, not a social media verdict. And forensic extraction can recover data from a device long after a user believes it is permanently gone. Deleted does not mean destroyed, not when the right tools are applied. Sheriff John LeButtock's office stated it never had physical possession of phone and formally requested it for forensic examination. The family's investigators examined the device first. Following the July 15th meeting between Christine and Elmore Walmsley and District Attorney Angela Mears Morris, both sides reached an agreement that legal analysts described as highly unusual. A joint simultaneous phone inspection, where the family's forensic experts and law enforcement examined the device at the same time, pulling data the same way, so that neither side can later dispute what the other found or how they found it. That arrangement does not happen without sustained pressure. It reflects both how far trust had eroded between this family and local investigators, and a genuine move by D.A. Morris's office to close that gap. Then there's a video. In the early days of the investigation, Attorney Ben Crump referenced a short clip that had been circulating in which a voice could be heard demanding a phone back. Crump's team indicated they believed the voice belonged to Nolan. That claim moved through the internet at speed and was treated as confirmed fact within hours of being mentioned. It was not confirmed. Tracking Shepard, one of Nolan's friends, came forward publicly to ABC News and stated the voice on that video was his own from a separate, unrelated altercation he was involved in that day, and that no one was nearby in the water but not visible anywhere in the footage. When a reporter pressed Crump on this directly at a later press conference, his response was noticeably more careful than his earlier statements had been. He acknowledged the original claim came from a single witness, that a second witness had since disputed it, and that his team now is audio experts working to determine whose voice is actually captured on the recording. He also committed going forward to presenting single witness claims as exactly that. That is a correction on the record from the family's own attorney, and it is stated here once. Track and Shepard addressed the phone separation in that same ABC News interview. He said everyone in Tai Chi group left their phones on the boat that day to keep them away from salt water and splashing, and that when he chose not to go into water, he placed his own phone on the boat's dashboard alongside around 15 others from the rest of the group. He also said plainly that the reason Nolan stayed on the island was that he had met a girl, and planned to catch a ride back to the mainland on a different boat later. Christine and Elmore Wansley through Ben Crump responded to Shepard's account without hostility. They said they had never personally met him and were not in a position to discount what he remembered. They said they welcomed every account from every person who was on that island because what they're looking for before anything else is a truth. The forensic phone inspection has not been completed as of this recording. The grand jury is not yet convened. This case is moving into the phase where the evidence stops being discussed and starts being examined under controlled, documented conditions. And what that process finds will shape everything that comes next. If you are not subscribed on SAW Files yet, right now is the moment to do it. Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications, because when this case moves, it is going to move fast, and you do not want to be catching up after fact. The state of Mississippi performed its autopsy on Nolan Wells on July 7th, one day after his body was recovered from the water near Horn Island's northwestern shore. That examination was carried out at the Mississippi State Medical Examiner's office, and as of this recording, the results have not been released to the public. That is not an oversight. It is deliberate. Mississippi Department of Public Safety Commissioner Sean Tyndall confirmed publicly that the state autopsy report will be withheld until a grand jury has had the opportunity to review it, at which point it transfers to District Attorney Angela Mears-Moratha's office. A preliminary assessment indicated no initial evidence of drug or alcohol involvement, but officials were careful to frame that as preliminary. Toxicology results take time, and the full picture is not yet available. No official cause of death, no official manner of death. The state's findings remain sealed. That left the family with one option if they wanted answers on their own timeline. They commissioned an independent autopsy. The examination was performed by Dr. Roger Mitchell, president of the National Medical Association and the former chief medical examiner of Washington, D.C., a man with the credentials and experience to conduct exactly this kind of review. The cause was covered in part by Colin Kaepernick, whose contribution to the family's independent investigation extended beyond public statements. The preliminary findings were announced on July 22nd at the 117th NAACP National Convention in Chicago. Christine and Elmore Wansley stood alongside Ben Crump as those results were made public. The finding, cause, and manner of death undetermined, pending further investigation. Foul play cannot be ruled out. Two details from Dr. Mitchell's preliminary report carry specific weight. The first involves what he did not receive. When Dr. Mitchell conducted his examination, Nolan's internal neck structures, including his trachea, were not provided to him. They had been retained by the initial state pathologist. Dr. Mitchell stated he did not know the reason for that retention, but he and medical experts who spoke to ABC News acknowledged that pathologists do sometimes retain tissue for additional testing, particularly when there are questions about fracture or compression in that area. It is a recognized practice. It is also a gap in what the independent examination could fully assess, and Ben Crump publicly demanded that the Mississippi Medical Examiner's Office provide Dr. Mitchell with his photographs and observations from the original examination so the independent review could be as complete as possible. As of this recording, that request had not been confirmed or fulfilled. The second detail is a context Dr. Mitchell placed around the circumstances of the death itself, specifically the significance of it occurring in or near water. Considered alongside Nolan's documented physical condition as a trained collegiate athlete, Jackson County Coroner Bruce Lynn offered his own perspective to CNN that the current running along the northwestern end of Horn Island is genuinely strong, and that the area carries a documented history of drowning incidents that predate this case entirely. Brian Trashers of the United Cajun Navy echoed that assessment, noting the current in that specific stretch is capable of overwhelming even strong swimmers. He also returned to the same question he raised during the search, that with a number of people present on that beach on July 4th, the complete absence of anyone coming forward to say they saw a person in distress in the water that afternoon remains something investigators in the family have not been able to explain. Two autopsies, two separate laboratories working from the same body. As of this recording, neither has produced a confirmed cause of death. The most important forensic question in this entire case remains officially unanswered. On July 15th, 11 days after Nolan Wells did not come home from Horn Island, His parents sat across a table from the Jackson County District Attorney. For first time since their son's body had been recovered, Christine and Elmore Wallia walked into that meeting with Attorney Ben Crump, Attorney Eric Hers, who has been leading the family's independent investigative effort, and Attorney Liza Pock. What they walked out with were two concrete commitments. First, once the Jackson County Sheriff's Office concludes its investigation, the case will be presented to a grand jury. Second, both sides agreed to the joint simultaneous phone inspection that was covered in previous chapter. The grand jury announcement traveled fast online and was almost immediately misread by a large portion of the public following this case. A grand jury referral sounds like charges. It is not charges. In Jackson County, presenting an unnatural or suspicious death to a grand jury is standard procedure. It happens routinely. It does not require evidence of a crime, and it does not mean prosecutors believe one occurred. A grand jury is a panel of citizens, typically between 15 and 25 people in his jurisdiction, who review whatever evidence prosecutors choose to present and decide whether probable cause exists to move forward. There is no defense present. There is no public record of the proceedings. And the DA's office stated directly in the aftermath of that July 15th meeting that this case is not currently being treated as a criminal investigation. Not everyone accepted that framing at face value. Former Mississippi Judge Carlos Moore went on record with his own concerns about District Attorney Anja Mias-Murth, pointing specifically to a previous case involving a fatal police shooting where he says her office had substantial evidence and still did not secure an indictment. His position is direct. A grand jury referral from this office should not be mistaken for meaningful forward momentum until results prove otherwise. He said he intended to watch this case closely. Attorney Tyler Bailey offered a different perspective. He explained that the referral is procedurally routine and that even if charges did eventually emerge in the grand jury process, they would not necessarily point toward homicide. Without a confirmed cause of death, the more likely territory for any charges would involve the aftermath, obstruction of justice, accessory after the fact, or related offenses tied to how the hours following Nolan's disappearance were handled rather than the disappearance itself. Erica has added a detail at that same press conference that put the scale of public interest in this case into concrete terms. His team is receiving between 50 and 100 calls every single day from people claiming they were on Horn Island on July 4th or know someone who was. That volume of potential witnesses is significant. What investigators do with those contacts will matter. Hers also raised a specific legal complaint that had nothing to do with theories or speculation. Under Mississippi law, immediate family members in a death case are entitled to receive an instant report within 72 hours. That window had expired long before the July 15th meeting. The family still had not received the report. Christine added her own detail. The last time anyone from the sheriff's department had contacted the family before that meeting was the prior Tuesday, and that contact did not come from the sheriff's office. It came from Christine, who sent a text message asking for an update on her own son's death investigation. Following the meeting, D.A. Morris's office agreed to assign a dedicated victim advocate as the family's primary point of contact going forward. The office acknowledged a communication gap. That acknowledgement came only because the family's legal team put on the table in that room. On the same day, Nolan was laid to rest. Christine Wansley filed a petition in Jackson County Chancery Court to open her son's estate and serve as its administrator. The estate's assets, as described in the filing, would consist solely of claims for damages arising from the circumstances of Nolan's death. That filing is a legal door being held open. Whatever the criminal process does or does not produce, ensures the family retains a right to pursue civil accountability. It is one of the most significant legal moves in this entire case, and it received a fraction of the attention deserved. When the FBI's name entered this case publicly, speculation moved faster than facts. Some people read federal involvement as proof the case had been secretly escalated into something far more serious than local authorities were admitting. Others read it as the opposite. Federal agents stepping in to manage the narrative rather than investigate the death. The FBI's Jackson Field office eventually addressed both readings directly, releasing a full public statement that was deliberate in its tone and precise in what it confirmed. The statement said the agency has been supporting the Jackson County Sheriff's Office and beginning using federal tools and partnerships that the sheriff's office leads this investigation and will continue to lead it, and that the FBI's specific focus has been on interstate threats directed at individuals connected to the case. Sheriff John Ledbetter separately confirmed to Vox that the FBI is also assisting with digital evidence examination, a role he described as not unusual given that Horn Island sits on federal land, and the two agencies have an established working relationship. That word threats is where this section of the story becomes something beyond investigation into Nolan's death. While Christine and Elmore Lanlade were in the process of planning their 18-year-old son's funeral, anonymous hate mail arrived targeting their legal team. It came while they were choosing a church and writing a eulogy. Tracking Shepard stated publicly that he and others connected to the case had been receiving online threats since the story drew national attention. Warren Hudson said the volume and nature of the threats directed at him were severe enough that he made a decision not to attend Nolan's funeral at all. Judge Ashley Cole, whose stepson Warren was on the boat with Nolan that day, stated publicly that she and her family had received a wave of death threats on July 30th. Those threats produced the first concrete criminal accountability in this entire story, though not in the way most people following the case expected. A California man was arrested for allegedly sending death threats directly to Judge Ashley Cole. The messages targeted Cole and members of her family and included images of her children. Investigators traced the social media account responsible through a combination of email IP addresses, date of birth, phone number, and street address cross-referencing. The suspect was identified and taken into custody. That arrest is the first time anyone connected to the public hysteria surrounding this case has faced legal consequences for their actions. Separately, a 21-year-old named Bart Immonen Jr. found himself at the center of false accusation that spread across social media with no factual foundation. Ed Munson is a punter at the University of Wyoming and a former teammate of Nolan's at Ocean Springs High School. Online users analyzing background audio from the STO distress call claimed to hear the name Bart in a recording and constructed an accusation from there. His attorney, Russ Latino, confirmed that Edmy had never met Katie McCormick before Nolan's death, had no involvement in the events of July 4th in any capacity that warrants suspicion, and has fully cooperated with investigators by voluntarily handing over his boat, his GPS records, and his phone. A second false claim tied to a misidentified photograph that some online users claim showed Edmundo McCormick was also addressed and rejected by Latino. A defamation lawsuit is being prepared. Mississippi Attorney General Lynn Fitch released a public statement making the state's position clear. Anyone who threatens or attempts to intimidate investigators, prosecutors, or witnesses connected to this case will be held accountable under the law. Mississippi Department of Public Safety Commissioner Sean Tingle went further, stating directly that online misinformation has been the accelerator behind the threats and that both state and federal law enforcement are actively monitoring and responding to the situation. During the investigation, AI-generated fake videos of Christine Wells, Wanley reportedly is circulated online. Ben Crump addressed this without equivocation. No one's life should be threatened in the pursuit of truth, and no one should be treated as guilty before evidence establishes it. That principle, Trump made clear, applies to every name connected to this case on every side of it without exception. The investigation into Nolan's death is still open. The investigation into the threats surrounding it now as its first arrest. On Monday, July 20th, 2026, 16 days after Nolan Wells did not come home from Horn Island, his family laid him to rest at Centerpoint Church in Ocean Springs, Mississippi. Visitation opened at 9 a.m. and ran through 11 o'clock. The service followed immediately after. Christine had been clear beforehand about what she wanted the day to feel like. She said Nolan would not want people sitting around crying. She wanted a celebration, something that reflected who her son actually was rather than only the circumstances of how he was lost. After the service, a celebration of life was held at the Jackson County Fairgrounds. It was open not just to immediate family, but to former teammates from every level of Nolan's football career, coaches, classmates, and media. Christine reached out personally to coach Les George to make sure players who had known Nolan from middle school through his time at Southwest Mississippi Community College were there and represented. The Mississippi Coast Coliseum and Convention Center had voted unanimously to offer their venue for the occasion. The family chose Synagogue Church instead. The Coliseum released a public statement supporting that decision fully with no pressure and no pushback. A small detail that reflects something true about how the broader community responded to this family. Reverend Al Sharpton officiated at the family's request. Tyler Perry covered the full cost of the funeral. The service was liveried in full. A deliberate choice by Christina opened what is normally one of the most private moments of family endures to the national audience that have been following this case. Mississippi's governor publicly attributed much of the division surrounding the case to the involvement of Ben Crump and Al Sharpton. That statement is part of the public record and is noted here as such. Before the service ended, Christine spoke directly to Nolan's friends, the same young people whose accounts of July 4th sit at the center of so many unresolved questions. She asked them to take care of their mental health. She acknowledged they were carrying weight of their own. In the middle of a legal fight for answers about her son's death, she made space for that. That is worth noting. Before we close this file, here is where things actually stand. Not what social media says, not what any single account claims. What is confirmed, what is pending, and what remains entirely open, stated plainly without inflation. Confirmed. GPS data from the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources documents the boat's full movements on July 4th from a 9:56 a.m. departure to a 4:31 p.m. exit from Horn Island and a 5:44 p.m. return to the mainland dock. The bilge pump failure is independently corroborated by real-time dispatch audio recorded hours before anyone knew Nolan would not be coming home. Nolan's body was formally identified through dental records on July 7th by Jackson County Coroner Bruce Lind. The independent autopsy conducted by Dr. Roger Mitchell returned a preliminary finding of cause and manner of death undetermined, with foul play explicitly not ruled out. The case is heading to a grand jury once the Jackson County Sheriff's Office concludes its investigation. Both the family's forensic team and law enforcement have agreed to a joint simultaneous inspection of Nolan's phone. The FBI's Jackson Field office has confirmed his role supporting the sheriff's office and specifically addressing interstate threats connected to the case. Katie McCormick met with Christine Wells, one lay directly face-to-face. Christine filed a petition in Jackson County Chancery Court to open Nolan's estate and preserve the family's right to pursue civil action. A California man was arrested on July 30th for allegedly sending death threats to Judge Ashley Cole. Pending, the state autopsy report remains sealed and will not be released publicly until after grand jury reviews it. Final toxicology results have not been issued. The joint forensic phone inspection has not yet been completed. The grand jury has not convened. Dr. Roger Mitchell has not yet received Nolan's internal neck structures or the state medical examiner's photographs and observations from the original examination, both of which Ben Crump has publicly requested to allow a more complete independent review. Unresolved, why Nolan was not on that boat when it left Horn Island at 4:31 p.m. What happened during the 90-minute window between his last confirmed sighting around 3:00 p.m. and the boat's departure? Whose voice is captured on the disputed video? Still being reviewed by audio experts with no confirmed answer. What the phone forensics will reveal once the joint inspection is completed, whether the state autopsy and the independent autopsy will align or produce conflicting conclusions, and what either outcome means for the direction of this investigation going forward. No cause of death has been officially confirmed. No individual has been named a suspect. No charges have been filed in connection with the death of Nolan Xavier Wells. His coaches at Ocean Springs High School in Southwest Mississippi Community College remembered him as someone who made every player around him feel like they belonged. His principal remembered him as one of the hardest working and most genuinely kind students to come through the building. His father called him a silent leader, someone who showed rather than told and who people followed because of it. His mother said all the best parts of her are with him. Nolan Xavier Wells was 18 years old. He went to Horn Island on 4th July, 2026 for a holiday weekend with his friends. He had 2 days before summer training camp. He had a season ahead of him. He did not come home. And the people who love him are still standing the same place they were that night in the McDonald's parking lot, asking the same question, waiting for an answer that has not come. Unsolved files will be here when it does. The state autopsy results, The phone forensic findings and the grand jury process are all moving toward conclusions that will define where this case goes next. And when any one of those breaks, this channel will have the full breakdown before the story has time to get distorted. Subscribe right now and turn on the bell notification so you're not catching up after the fact. This is the most consequential phase this case has entered since Nolan's body was recovered.